December 1999, Charles Schulz sat alone in his studio when the phone rang. Minutes later, he whispered two words that ended 50 years of work: "It's over." His hands trembled, his vision blurred, and cancer had taken the one thing he lived for: drawing. When asked if Peanuts should continue without him, Schulz refused. "When I'm done, it's done." And just like that, the world's most beloved comic strip ended in silence, not with applause, but with a broken man saying goodbye to his life's only companion. Charles Monroe Schulz was born on November 26, 1922, in Minneapolis, Minnesota, a cold city that matched the quiet tone of his early life. His father, Carl, ran a small barber shop and took pride in his steady hands and polite manner, while his mother, Dina, was gentle and warm, though illness often left her confined to bed. Money was always tight, and the family lived through the Great Depression, moving between cramped apartments and counting every dollar. Charles grew up watching his parents struggle to hold the family together with quiet dignity, and he absorbed that silence like a second language. As an only child, he preferred solitude from the beginning. While other boys roughhoused on frozen streets, Charles found comfort in sketching the world around him, his neighborhood, his parents, and especially his dog, Spike. Spike was not just a pet, he was Charles's first real friend. The dog followed him everywhere and seemed to understand him in a way people never did. When Spike died after being hit by a car, 10-year-old Charles buried him with his own hands, never forgetting the sound of his father's shovel striking the frozen dirt. That loss, small to the world but enormous to him, became the emotional seed that would later grow into Snoopy, a dog who never truly leaves and who dreams and laughs even when his master feels alone. School was even harder. Charles was smaller than his classmates, awkward, and painfully shy. Whenever teachers asked questions, his voice froze. Though he skipped 2 grades because he was bright, it only made him younger and more isolated. During recess he sat alone, tracing doodles in the dirt while other children played. He later admitted that Charlie Brown's nervous smile and fragile hope before every disappointment came directly from those lonely moments. By adolescence, loneliness had become routine, and drawing became his only comfort. He spent hours hunched over scraps of paper, lost in worlds of his own making. His parents could not afford art lessons, but his mother still found ways to buy him pencils, sometimes skipping meals to do so. Her faith in him never wavered. "You'll make it one day," she told him. In 1937, at the age of 14, he drew Spike and sent the sketch to Ripley's Believe It or Not. When it was published, he rushed to show his classmates, but no one cared. The joy turned to silence, teaching him a lesson he carried forever: even success can feel lonely. Still, he continued drawing because it was the only way he knew how to keep himself alive. In 1943, just as Charles Schulz's life seemed to be beginning, everything fell apart. His mother, the only person who truly believed in his dream, was dying of cervical cancer. At 20 years old, he was old enough to understand but too young to accept it. Every night he heard her crying from the next room as the disease spread. He tried to stay strong, drawing little cartoons to make her smile, but nothing could stop what was coming. That winter, he received a draft notice from the U.S. Army. On February 28, 1943, only 3 days before he shipped out, his mother died. He never had the chance to say a proper goodbye. Years later, he admitted that every Peanuts strip carried a piece of her, and Charlie Brown's quiet sadness was born during that terrible week. Schulz served in the 20th Armored Division as a staff sergeant leading a .50 caliber machine gun squad through Europe. Small, shy, and terrified, he hated guns and was never built for war, yet he marched through freezing fields across France and Germany, witnessing death firsthand. Once, he aimed at a German soldier but realized he had forgotten to load his weapon. The soldier surrendered anyway, and it became the only time Schulz ever fired a gun. On April 30, 1945, his division arrived at Dachau concentration camp one day after its liberation. Survivors wandered the roads starved, broken, and barely human. The sight haunted him forever. Though he rarely spoke about it, the empathy and sorrow that filled Peanuts came directly from those memories. Before leaving for war, Schulz had promised his mother, "We'll probably get a dog when I come back." Years later, Snoopy became that dog, the one who made the world smile and the one his mother never got to meet. When he returned home in late 1945, he was no longer the boy who simply loved to draw. He was a man carrying grief and loneliness that only his art could express. After the war, Schulz took a small job grading correspondence art lessons at art instruction schools in Minneapolis. The pay was miserable, but it kept him close to pencils and paper, the only things that still made sense. There, he began sketching children who spoke with adult honesty. He called the strip Little Folks, and it appeared in the St. Paul Pioneer Press in 1947. The style was simple and minimal, but emotionally deep, gentle, sad, and painfully real. Readers loved it, but editors did not. When Schulz asked for a raise and a better placement in the paper, they refused, and after 3 years the strip was dropped entirely. Devastated but unwilling to quit, he sent his drawings to United Feature Syndicate in New York. They liked the strip but hated the title, claiming Lil Folks sounded too much like Lil Abner. Without consulting him, they renamed it Peanuts. Schulz despised the name, calling it terrible because it sounded small and insignificant, but he had no power to stop it. On October 2, 1950, Peanuts debuted in 7 newspapers. Schulz earned only $90 during the first month. The strip was tiny and almost invisible, hidden in a corner of the comics page, yet inside those little panels lived everything he had experienced: loneliness, failure, and hope. The first strip showed Charlie Brown walking by while 2 children said, "Good old Charlie Brown," before one added, "I hate him." It was dark, honest, funny, and a perfect reflection of its creator. 2 days later, Snoopy appeared. At first he was simply a dog, but Schulz saw something deeper in him, a dreamer, a free spirit, and the part of himself that refused to surrender. By the late 1950s, Peanuts had exploded from 7 newspapers into hundreds, and within a decade it was everywhere: magazines, lunchboxes, school walls, and even church bulletins. Charlie Brown became the lovable face of failure, while Snoopy became the dreamer every child wanted to be. Charles Schulz, the quiet barber's son from Minnesota, suddenly became one of the most famous men in America. Yet fame felt hollow. He married Joyce Halverson in 1951, and together they built a family and a stable home, but emotionally Schulz remained distant. He worked alone in his studio 6 days a week, drawing every strip by hand and refusing to hire assistants because, as he said, "No one else can draw my feelings." That perfectionism made him legendary, but it also isolated him from the people closest to him. Joyce once admitted she felt like a widow whose husband was still alive. Beneath the laughter of Peanuts, Schulz's melancholy deepened. Charlie Brown's endless failures mirrored his own insecurities, Lucy's cruelty reflected the people who mocked him, and the little red-haired girl came from a real heartbreak. Her name was Donna Johnson, an accountant Schulz loved before he became famous. He proposed to her, but she refused and married another man. Schulz never truly recovered, spending the rest of his life channeling that heartbreak into Charlie Brown's silent longing. In 1965, A Charlie Brown Christmas aired on CBS. Executives feared it would fail because it was too quiet, too slow, and too religious, but half the country watched it. The special won an Emmy and a Peabody Award, becoming one of the most beloved television specials ever made. Yet even success could not cure his sadness. "Happiness is a warm puppy," he once said, "but sadness is knowing how brief that warmth can be." By the 1970s, Peanuts appeared in more than 1,000 newspapers and earned Schulz millions, but he remained what he had always been, a lonely man transforming sorrow into something the world could smile at. During the mid-1970s, Schulz stood at the height of fame and influence, yet privately he was breaking apart. Years of working alone 6 days a week had destroyed his health. He had drawn nearly 18,000 Peanuts strips without pause, and his hand began shaking uncontrollably due to an essential tremor. Sometimes he had to hold his drawing wrist with his other hand just to keep the pen steady. Exhausted and trapped by perfectionism, he finally took a short vacation for the first time in decades, only to realize that newspapers simply reprinted old strips and readers barely noticed the difference. That realization terrified him. Around the same time, his relationship with United Feature Syndicate turned toxic. Executives pushed for fresher ideas and even suggested using other artists to help him. Schulz refused completely, insisting that if anyone else drew Peanuts, then it would no longer be Peanuts. Secretly, the syndicate hired Superman artist Al Plastino to create backup strips in case Schulz quit or died. When Schulz discovered this in 1977, he felt deeply betrayed. Instead of walking away, however, he renegotiated his contract and secured complete control over the comic strip. From that moment on, Peanuts could never be written or drawn by anyone else, not even after his death. The 1980s brought even more struggles. Rival cartoonists accused him of stealing ideas, particularly for Snoopy's sidekick Woodstock. Though Schulz won the legal battles, they drained him emotionally. In 1981, heart surgery forced him to stop working for the first time in 31 years. During his recovery, counterfeit Peanuts strips filled with fake dialogue and adult humor spread through more than 200 newspapers, prompting the FBI to launch Operation Snoopy to stop them. To the world, Charles Schulz looked unstoppable, but privately his body and spirit were slowly collapsing. Every new strip became a battle against time, against his trembling hands, and against the terrifying fear that one day he would no longer be able to draw at all.